And the next item on the agenda, item 6, is a Good Neighbor Authority. And we had LSO. Ms. Hanson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hanson, Staff Attorney, LSO, presenting Bill Draft 26, LSO 125, version 0.4, Good Neighbor Authority Amendments. So this bill draft was requested at the committee's June meeting based on the Wyoming State Forestry's proposed amendments. So I'll just start by walking through the draft. Page 2, lines 13 and 14, authorizes the Wyoming State Forestry Authority revolving account to include grants, gifts, transfers, bequests, and donations. Page 2, lines 15 through 19, authorizes the Wyoming State Forester to accept grants, gifts, transfers, bequests, and donations for deposit into the account, including those which are limited in their purpose by the grantor, except as provided in Wyoming Statute 36-1-503A6, which is on page 3, lines 16 and 17. So page 3, lines 9 and 10 authorizes the state forester to make expenditures out of the account for hiring additional employees. Page 3, lines 16 and 17 prohibits the state forester from accepting any interest in real property for purposes of Good Neighbor Authority projects. The staff comment on the bottom of page 3 states that the committee expressed some concern about the proposed language authorizing donations of property. The language above was added to address those concerns. A similar concept is included in Wyoming Statute 915-103H, where the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Account Board cannot outright accept fee simple real property, but can recommend that the Board of Land Commissioners accept the property for the credit into the account. That statute is provided in the bill draft for the committee's reference. Page 4, line 34, removes the restriction that employees hired under this subsection shall only be funded using federal funds deposited into the account. The staff comment on page 5 highlights that by striking the word federal, this would allow employees to be hired using funds from any source in the account, including federal funds, legislative appropriations or state funds, county funds, partner funds, and through this bill draft donations. Page 4, lines 35 through 37 removes the restriction on the number of additional Good Neighbor Authority employees that the state forester can hire. The statute originally provided that the state forester cannot fill more than 4 full-time employee positions and 6 at-will employee contract positions. Section 2 on page 5, line 13 provides an effective date of July 1st, 2026, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Co-Chairman Dave. Go ahead, Co-Chairman Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. On page 4, lines 34 through 37 of those changes, and this may be a question for the state forester. I'm not sure if it is or not, but just to get an idea, if they have those 4 full-time employees right now, and it allowed them to go up to 6, and just those additional funds this sort of opens it up for more staffing, which hopefully with the Good Neighbor Authority, working with the Forest Service, there'll be a lot more activity and those positions will be needed. But do those positions take away from the funding, so to speak, of helping fire mitigation and thinning and those kind of things? I guess it's sort of a broad question, but that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, I'll take the first stab at that. But the statute is for the state forester to hire additional employees for just Good Neighbor Authority projects or other federally funded cooperative forest management projects from the account. I'm not exactly sure. State Forester Norris would probably be best to answer exactly how those positions are used. But
would you mind coming up, Director Norris? Thank you.
Good afternoon,
Good
Chairman
afternoon.
and Chairman Ide. So correct, this is specific for through the Good Neighbor Authority account. Currently, we fund our projects through this account as well. So this gives us the authority, and we have different special agreements between each of our forests and the BLM. And through those agreements, we have budgets within each of them, and there is a portion of that that goes into funding that position, whether it's the full-time or the AWAC position. And so whatever money is, and we make those decisions together with the Forest Service when there's revenue coming into these accounts. So we have been able to fund a full-time GNA forester in the Black Hills off of revenue. We cannot do that in some of these forests. And so we've been working, I met with Assistant Chief Chris French? What do you call Associate Chief Chris French, and requested an additional 2 million to go into certain accounts to keep these positions going. But that you're absolutely right. So there's this give and take that has to happen. We can get some fuels work done, but then we're running out of how much money we have to keep that position going because they're only federally funded at this time.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Quick follow-up. I'm trying to think of how to pose this question. Do the number of employees with, we wrote a letter to this Department of Interior and the Department USDA chiefs, secretaries, and it was one that was just sent out, a month ago. It was kind of from our last meeting, and it was encouraging them to continue funding that and maybe further funding it with maybe more activity that we're expecting with the executive orders and the big beautiful bill. Do you expect that to happen, or give us your kind of take on that, if you would, please? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Co-Chairman, that is a good question. The Forest Service was able to bring back in, from my understanding, a certain amount of money for their timber programs. But what Wyoming is competing with is there's only so much money that's budgeted for all this timber activity. And they're going to put the money where the largest bang for their buck is going to be, because they have some pretty high goals. 25% increase. And so where those projects are ready and where they're going to go is where that money's probably going to end up going. With that, we have because our projects are pretty well lined out, we got together all the forest supervisors and both the regions and said, this is where our priority areas are going to be. This is where we're going to do our projects on all our forests in Wyoming. And so we've already been working together, have projects lined out. So when we did go and make certain requests, some of that money will probably flow into GNA. Some of that money is also going to flow into just Forest Service projects as well. So there's only so much. We haven't seen in the big beautiful bill additional money going into specifically Good Neighbor Authority or into the Forest Service's budget itself for them to pass on additional money into this account. So we don't know yet, but we haven't seen this large amount of money being invested into the system yet.
Go ahead.
One more quick follow-up. So with this bill, before it was limited to just federal funds.
Correct.
And this opens it up, for further private donations or funding. Have you been approached with that before? And is there some upside that obviously there could be some upside, but have you seen any in the past, and what does that look like? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Co-Chairman, yes, we have been proposed before from timber industry to put funding forward to have additional positions, foresters on the ground doing work. We currently have, through the National Forest Foundation, a weird we have an NGO also paying for our forester on the Shoshone National Forest currently. Now, it's federal funds that they were given, and then they're passing it through to us. But just think if the Turkey or TNC or any NGO would like to, they could take their own funds and say, we would like to help invest getting a forester to do this type of work in this area, for example. So this will open up those opportunities that we've been approached with already. I think it'll open up more opportunities to have greater dialogue in that. Think about counties, county commissioners, things like that, if they budgeted. I know there's been discussion about that before. If they want to see, in their county, and state forestry has the skill sets to hire that forester and make sure that that state contracting is coming in and it's happening through that system, the counties could be looking at that too. So this really will open that type of opportunity up. And with that, we know other states have had pretty different businesses come in and invest significant money in Arizona and New Mexico in particular into the restoration of their forests. We could see those same type of opportunities now with the way this bill is set up.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you. Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This ties into kind of my question. I guess when you're getting these dollars and you may hire more people, how are we going to guarantee that the dollars are there? Are you figuring that in that, yeah, we're going to take the money, we're going to hire somebody, and we're going to have enough money there for 5 years or whatever? So it's a concern.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Larson, you're absolutely right. So, and I didn't answer Co-Chairman's first question, I think that he asked Talise about how many positions we have right now. And the reason for that is because we don't have a funding stream that is dependable at the moment. So we have one permanent position that is really helping us manage the whole program. And then we have one permanent position in the Black Hills that is a forester, a forestry technician. We are in the process of we created a permanent forester for the Bridger Teton. That position kept, when it was an AWAC position, we couldn't keep it, and we were falling farther behind. And so we have really worked with the Bridger Teton and securing enough funding for us in those accounts to know that we have quite a few years in there. And then we will have to plan, like you're talking about, from that timber revenue to hold it for long-term for that salary, right? And then the next one we're looking at is in the Medicine Bow route. Again, we have a year-round position, but that's where I called Associate Chief Chris French, because we're going to need some money invested into that system before we hire a full-time position in that agreement. So where we have funding to keep that position going for quite a few years, we can go into a full-time position. Where we don't, we have not moved into that direction yet.
Follow up?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned you may have some industries that are interested, and have they kind of talked about a commitment like that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, there is some discussion definitely of a commitment of that. And so I think if there is an opportunity to invest and help participate in that, as they see the benefit of the Good Neighbor, I think that is definitely a discussion we can have, and we can set up, again, a memorandum of understanding. We did have, for example, BOPU, the city of Cheyenne, they provided over $100,000 for a G&A project to State Forestry to do the Rob Roy project. So we have mechanisms to pay for the projects. We just don't have a mechanism yet to pay for the position itself, which is what this will do.
Follow up, or you good? Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. So basically, if I'm following you right, this is just a tool in the box. Should these opportunities present themselves, we're prepared to take advantage of them. Is that what you see in this bill?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's correct. But I also, and I was going to bring this up in my presentation, this allowing more flexibility in the hiring process will not only open us up to taking this as a tool, but this could create us more of a partnership. When we have longer standing staff in these positions, they're making longer decisions for our forest. They're at the table as partners with our federal partners. They're not just some technician that's doing a summer seasonal job. And so this is creating a true standing in a soon to be larger partnership, right? In getting our forest managed. And I think that's really important to think about. And I also think that there's going to be there's a lot of conversation about what's the next step up in the Good Neighbor Authority. Where else can the state do additional work on our federal lands? And so this is, again, who would be the one to help oversee and manage that? What kind of things could that look like in the future? Going through this statute and state forestry really allows us an opportunity to explore beyond just Good Neighbor Authority projects.
Thank you. Senator Ride?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. So I'm just trying to visualize this a little bit with, private industry basically contributing and potentially looking for some favoritism on their particular project, and whether, what are the conversations on conflict of interest and those sorts of things. Just a question to, not that, I'm trying to direct it to anybody, but it's obvious. They're going to say, hey, we kind of want to earmark this. We'll give you the money, and you got to spend the money on this particular project. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman, the same when we get money to do a project, right? We get the money to do the project, we're going to go do the project. But I think we're going to have to update the Good Neighbor Authority rules on this account and with these changes. And at that time, we can definitely address some of those concerns. And I'd be very open to what you would recommend for that moving forward as we take in consideration into that. But yes, you're right. We all tend to end up that way in land management agencies. Here's your money to do this project. And part of that project may be you're going to hire a seasonal with it, or, So I think there's some opportunity there to look at the account and look at the rules and think about it in supporting the program as a whole, supporting maybe positions as they get established as a whole, and thinking of it that way. But I understand the concern and hear you loud and clear. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions on the bill that Latisse read for us? And Director Norris, you're sitting here. I don't know if you wanted to say anything more. You're also on the agenda this next, so thanks, Latisse.
Okay. Yes, I'll continue on. I'll have Matt introduce himself here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Matt Marshall. I'm Assistant State Forester for Operations with Wyoming State Forestry Division.
And he does all things G&A, as well as state trust land timber and private land. All right. First, I'd like to start with an important update to this committee that recently occurred on August 1st. Governor Gordon signed Executive Order 2025-04, Increase of Active Forest Management in Wyoming. The new executive order provides clear direction and support for Wyoming State Forestry Division to expand our work. The executive order supports President Trump's executive order, the immediate expansion of American timber production, and brings it to Wyoming at all levels, local, state, and federal. I provided the committee a copy of the executive order for your review. The new Wyoming executive order reinforces Wyoming State Forestry's commitment under G&A, state, and private lands. Specifically, the order acknowledges Good Neighbor Authority program and directs state forestry to update our master agreements as necessary to increase active forest management and fuels mitigation projects across federal forest lands to the maximum extent practical and appropriate. There is also direction for state forestry to coordinate with the USDA on any co-management of federal forest lands. as well as cooperative management of forested lands designated or previously designated under the roadless area conservation. At the Wyoming executive order signing, State Forestry invited Wyoming's forest industry, federal agencies, county commissioners, conservation districts, other Wyoming state agencies, and Wyoming fire organizations to partner with us closely as we work to increase timber outputs, stabilize supply, and revitalize rural economies. Next, I would like to thank this committee for the proposed bill to amend the Good Neighbor Authority statute. It is a welcome bill for state forestry and aligns nicely with the new Wyoming executive order that focuses on increasing active management in Wyoming's forests. Wyoming's Good Neighbor Authority program is a proven partnership framework that expands the capacity of our federal partners and allows state-guided decisions involving forest management. As we have been seeking to slowly transition from at-will employee contractors to full-time positions for the program's efficiencies and delivery, we're really creating a sustainable approach that's going to shift that program from beyond just being a tool for isolated projects or circumstances to how the U.S. Forest Service and BLM will reach their timber goals. State Forestry has reviewed a Federal Forest Service district's organizational structure, and we believe one GNA forester can fulfill the responsibilities of at least 4 specialized federal positions. For example, our one full-time permanent GNA forester in the Black Hills is implementing the following federal positions: a timber prep crew lead, a certified cruiser, a contracting officer, and a sale administrator. This means that adding a full-time GNA position is far more efficient than hiring through the U.S. Forest Service and BLM processes. I have a few Good Neighbor Authority updates I do want to share with the committee from my last presentation. So currently, State Forestry has 43 Good Neighbor Authority contracts active or planned for 2025. That's treating 25,000 acres of federal lands. These contracts cover a variety of projects. The majority are timber sales, but there are thinning, fuels mitigation, aspen enhancement, and NEPA surveys being completed too. We have been expanding our Good Neighbor Authority staff capacity, where I talked about creating that full-time position in the Bridger-Teton National Forest. And we're also, like I said, working on getting a third one with the Medicine Bow Route National Forest. And that's really, again, relooking at our agreements and maximizing where we can meet the need and getting more work done on the ground. We believe these full-time foresters are going to provide needed continuity and reducing this turnover-related disruptions. The full-time forester position can build upon relationships, foster necessary trust with federal partners, the forest products industry, county government, and NGOs. And being able to keep a forester long-term also provides consistency in getting work completed, helping state forestry achieve targets and accomplishments, which is really important to do when it's coming to stabilizing a timber supply. In the Black Hills, our staff have found that they are increasing their own state timber outputs, almost doubling acres treated on state trust lands annually by implementing GNA and coordinating with the federal agencies. Through this integrated planning with the U.S. Forest Service and BLM, we have already committed an additional 20 projects covering over 8,000 acres in 2026. And this is really critical, as having state forestry working with our federal partners, planning out these projects, getting them to commit to this future project and timber supply. State Forestry completed a huge milestone with the Bureau of Reclamation, as we have finalized a Good Neighbor Authority agreement with the BOR to complete 250 acres of fuels mitigation work within the Keyhole Reservoir. So we're the first state forestry agency to have a Good Neighbor Authority agreement with the BOR. And we just really hope we have quite a few state parks with BOR lands ahead of us to get some more work done. So this is a good step in the right direction. So in closing, the Wyoming Good Neighbor Authority program is delivering results. It is effective, it's efficient, and in direct alignment with state and federal priorities. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge it's only myself and Matt up here speaking about state forestry success. And really the true success of this program is from our state forestry staff, their management, their deep commitment to implementing this program as it leads to healthier forests and our watersheds for Wyoming. It also takes leadership to recognize the value of this program and the value of state forestry, which our forest supervisors, our district rangers, as well as the BLM area managers have committed to working with us on. there's no doubt in my mind that without their support, we wouldn't be as far as we have been in this program. But the program's success isn't just because of state forestry or our federal partners. We've received significant support from Wyoming's county commissioners, conservation districts, the fire organizations, Wyoming's timber industry, NGOs, and as well as our legislature and our governor. And I just want to thank you, because of this program's success and impacts are the result of many organizations, of many agencies, and really the successful collaboration of the executive branch and the legislature on wanting to see our forests become healthier. So with that, I'll stop there and thank you all and take any questions.
Thank you. Did
Yeah.
that spur any questions from the committee? Senator Dockstader.
I thank you for that new enthusiasm. I feel appreciated. My phone, I got pictures this week of one of my, I asked, I'm leading up to, are we able to work with our federal folks as well as we can? I've got pictures of one of my district rangers. He's cutting and moving wood, and I worry for him. I'm worrying that the big guys are going to crush him for taking an aggressive approach to managing his district. Does he find ground support with our state offices, and can we keep all this going successfully? Because we'll see a new healthy forest, as my Representative Erickson will know. He lives that world. I think the big picture is we'll walk away with a better forest picture across the state of Wyoming. Your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes, we have full support. And I think one of the most critical parts about seeing somebody in the Forest Service actually starting to take on active management again is the support that they receive from the states, from the counties, and from everyone involved in it, conservation districts. This is something that is really the public all want to see happen, and so it's getting over and having these small successes is going to lead to larger successes. And so this program has been around for a decade, and it's been slowly growing on small successes. And I think right now it's what you're seeing, a larger leap that's happening, and we want to continue to see that happen, and so we're really committed to that. And so yes, if there's ever a need, we're right there working with those district rangers, our staff, and helping support all of those activities.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your support.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Man, the hot seat's been pretty cool today. Oh, okay. There we go. Co-chairman,
Yeah, I'll keep it alive
Stoke
here.
that fire.
So I remember we had a little conversation on the bus on our last committee meeting in Pinedale. And I know it's sort of a moving target question, but you talked about it again, just answering Senator Dockstader's question. Measuring success is a hard thing to do in this business, as far as, as the state, realizing, more timber being harvested, and as a result, they're helping their coffers to fund the state government, and then all of the other benefits that are hard to measure too. For recreation, you got better forests, you got healthier forests. I'm kind of an economics guy, and so you try to measure it economically on the success, and effectively in the private sector, that's what you have to do, or you go out of business. So, that's. I guess I don't know if there's really a question there, but can you comment on your definition of success with the good neighbor policy and the Forest Service, State Forest Service? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I look at success with our Good Neighbor program. I think, a one-year timeline is what I like to go back to. What did we accomplish? And I think for this past year, the relationships that we've built with our federal partners have completely shifted. A year ago today, I think we could have walked into a meeting and it'd have been, hey, keep your hands off. This is our house. We've gotten to the point now where they're actually coming to us and saying, is this something that you could utilize Good Neighbor Authority a tool, you know, with those mechanisms to make this go quicker, make it go more efficient. Is there any way that you can split this up into different things so that two sides of the industry can buy into this project rather than trying to focus in on one person to do all? So I think, you know, the greatest measure of success for this year has been those relationships, and we do have the accomplishments to kind of show for that as well. Just looking at the year out planning, it's a totally different story than last year, and we're actually building that 5-year plan that we've been talking about for 5 years.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman. It's difficult with forestry because the timber is probably the actual least valuable part, right? The economic side, because of what it takes to manage it and do all the great work that we need to do for our forests and our watershed. But the benefits and the return that comes from managing those lands, the healthier watersheds, the less amount of fire, the grazing that can finally happen, the wildlife habitat that can finally be available again. These are all parts of the process. And when you think about the economics of the recreation, whether it's hunting to regular recreation that is becoming available when we have these roads were all from old Forest Service logging roads that we recreate on now, right? And so we only, to keep them going, need to continue to manage our forests. And so, yes, the rate of return looks a lot different than maybe it did even in the 80s for the actual timber side. But the long-term significant value to our watersheds, to our forests and our economy, we much rather invest in getting that managed on the forest, dealing with the road, than the amount of retardant it's going to take and the amount of money I'm going to spend for a tanker to come through it and for try and put out a fire. So that's the best I can give you. I hope that helps, but it's a little bit different economy and value than just a straight rate of return on that timber.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
thank
Yeah,
you
go
very
ahead.
much. We had that conversation. I think it was good for everybody to hear all of the ulterior benefits we get that you can't necessarily measure, but they're recreation, watershed, all those things matter for healthy forests and a healthy economy. Thank you for that.
And I just would also like to echo that. I mean, I think, I don't want anybody to feel like I'm picking on them, but I do. I look at the Forest Service and how well the Forest Service and the State Forestry Department seem to work together. I'm not getting that same vibe from our friends over in the Bureau of Land Management, and that's why I'm hoping that maybe we can kind of steer them a little bit more to look at ways that we can soften the NEPA, because NEPA exists with you guys, and it doesn't seem to me that it's hamstringing you as much as it is our coal industry. And I guess that's one thing I guess we probably should be looking at as a committee, is how to help overcome that. But I applaud that, because I think that it is directly related to the fact that we have a state forester that's been trying to partner with them. And I say that just, I can tell that you guys do work together. I like the fact, because I remember having a fire, we had a 4,500 acre fire on the private property I was on, and I remember the Forest Service guys cut my locks off, which did not make me happy. They came up and they go, "What the heck are you guys doing?" And it was all private land, but they thought it was Forest Service land. And so, I mean, we had a little bit of a contest up there, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But it seems that the system is way more functional if we all play in the sandbox together. And I applaud it, because that's because of you guys working together. And it requires a team. And it seems like, as our forests, I mean, obviously last year was kind of a bad year, but I think the cogs have came together, and I applaud you guys for working that out, because it is. I'm happy to hear how well it's working, and hopefully we can continue to tweak the good neighbor as things progress. But I just wanted to thank you guys while you're here. So The next thing on our list would be public comment. If there's anybody that's got some public comment about the Good Neighbor Authority, or if the Forest Service would like to interject anything. I mean, I don't want you to feel obligated to say something, but if you guys would like to, you're welcome to come up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for an opportunity to be responsive to the comments that State Forester Norris and Assistant State Forester Marshall shared, and really appreciate their generous comments. As they mentioned, Good Neighbor Authority enables the Forest Service and the state of Wyoming to work together on several land management projects to promote healthy and resilient forests that are threatened by insect diseases and wildfires. So whether it's active management through timber sales, hazardous fuels reduction, habitat improvement, or watershed restoration, there's so many things that we can do together, and we're exploring all of that. Not too long ago, to the comments that Assistant Forester Marshall mentioned, we all sat down, we brought together all forest supervisors, including the experts, the timber program managers across our forests, with the state foresters, both the state of Wyoming as well as the state of South Dakota, to essentially open up the books, to be more transparent, to honor the relationship with states like it should be, honor to truly treat them as partners. We heard that loud and clear and have been honoring that intent since then. And that's what's been occurring, ensuring that there's visibility about what the timber programs look like at every unit level, what that out-year planning through FY26 and beyond is going to look like. And we're mindful of the budgetary constraints that the state is trying to manage. We are tracking that State Forester Norris has made that request of the Washington office and our Associate Chief, Chris French. You will finding us a willing partner. We are supportive of such a request. We're just waiting for things to go through the process we've been validating the fact that they've been great partners, and if additional resources are needed so that they can get that capacity to help us do more active management work, we're fully supportive of that, Mr. Chairman. And I'll hand it over to Forest Supervisor Andrew Johnson, if you may.
Nothing else to add.
Okay, thank you for your comments as well. Are there any comments, questions from the committee? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative
Chairman.
Erickson.
I echo the many things that you said about both our state forestry and the GNA, but I can't leave without complimenting the folks that we're seeing sitting across here, because in all the years that I've been at these meetings, and I've been through a lot of them, I haven't looked and seen people like we've seen, and that goes all the way from Western Wyoming, Region 4, or whichever region, all the way over to here. And I've had experience with these folks here too. But the main point is it's the people that are making the difference, because we didn't 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, we didn't look across the table and had people that were willing to work with the state and the federal together. And that's making the difference now. Hopefully we can keep this momentum going, but I can't leave without making that comment. It's significant, and that's why it's working. We've got to grab a hold of these things that are working well for us and continue to see these people that have multiple use and willing to deal with the issues that we have in front of us. And that's the big part. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thanks for your comments too.
Chairman, if I may.
Yep.
Representative Erickson, thank you so much for such generous comments. It truly takes a village. Myself, forest supervisors like Andrew Johnson, as well as many others that are fully committed to truly serve as good partners. Thank you.
And thank you. I guess the next thing that we have on here is public comments. Is there anybody that has any public comment? Oh. Ben, I can't remember your last name, but I remember Ben. Ben W.
Yeah, no
Go.
problem. Good afternoon, Mr.
Good
Chairman,
afternoon.
members of the committee. As a reminder, I'm Ben Woodkey, the Executive Director for Intermountain Forest Association. Thank you again for this important topic on the agenda today. We've heard a lot about the importance of forest management. We've heard a lot about the importance of staffing and funding to go along with that. I'm not going to belabor those topics here again, but on that messaging, I want to say thank you for the proposed language in this change here in this amendment. I think it goes a long way towards forming a pathway to increasing forest management in Wyoming. We've seen similar examples in other states where opening up the funding opportunities has attracted additional investments ranging from power companies to private industry, trying to invest in the health and management of those national forests in those states. Montana, just to our north, has accepted donations from industry as well, from the timber industry. And I've had some members reach out asking how they can contribute some, maybe a little bit more, as a way to help bolster good neighbor authority programs in their states, Wyoming being one of them. And the changes that you're proposing open that door and that pathway to increasing the work that's being done here, building on the Trump administration executive orders and building on Governor Gordon's executive order, and certainly moving towards the work that we know needs to be done in the forests. So thank you for that and appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions for Mr. Woodkey? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So last one on that item is committee directives. We got anything? Excuse me? Somebody gonna move it? So it's been moved, seconded. Dan moved it. Dan seconded. If we had another Dan, we could third it, but he dropped the
Bob.
ball.
Bob. How
Yeah.
many Bobs?
The Bobs, the triple Bobs, the double Dan, so.
I'm out of sort here. McKay.
Yeah, okay, I don't know. Do you mind if we call you Danny? Is that all right?
Yeah, I'll go Danny.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any comments, any questions? Do we need to go through the bill, or I thought Talise did a great job. Okay, ready to vote. Thank you.
Senator Dockstetter? Senator Larson?
Aye.
Representative Davis?
Aye.
Representative Erickson?
Aye.
Co-chairman Ide?
Aye.
Co-chairman Worf?
Aye.
That passed.
Thank you. So that one passed unanimous, and we did that ahead of schedule. How's that? We got back on schedule. So we're going to jump down. The next one is the roadless rule, and we'll bring the Forest Service back up. Director Delgado, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you again for the opportunity to brief you on the roadless rule. I would like to provide you with an update on the impacts of the 2001 Roadless Area Conservation Rule, commonly referred to as the roadless rule. At the committee's last field hearing in Pinedale, Congresswoman Harriet Hageman provided a detailed history on the roadless rule. To recap, the 2001 roadless rule established prohibitions on road construction and timber harvesting on 58.5 million acres of inventoried roadless areas on National Forest System lands across 39 states. The intent of the 2001 roadless rule was to protect roadless areas within the National Forest System in the context of multiple use management. And what does that mean in terms of scope? Within Wyoming, there are more than 9.2 million acres of National Forest System land. Of those, about 3.2 million acres are considered in inventoried roadless areas. On June 23rd, Secretary of Agriculture Rollins announced that she was rescinding that 2001 rule. The Forest Service at this moment is awaiting for further guidance from the department as to how that rescission will be implemented, and we're going to look forward to updating you when we have more information. So we wish we had more at the time being, given the process of where things are at. We're really looking for departmental guidance on next steps, but look forward to future opportunities to brief you. And I have our forest supervisor here, Andrew Johnson, who could speak a little bit about the implications of the roadless rule within the state of Wyoming and the lands that he manages. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good, Matt.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman,
Right.
a
Yep.
little bit of context. Here on the Bighorn National Forest, since it's our backyard, we'll use the Bighorn as an example. And I'm more familiar with the Bighorn than I am with my neighboring forest. That's their role, not mine. But on the Bighorn's 1.1 million acres. Of that, 620,000 acres are included in inventoried roadless areas. So, essentially more than half the forest. 50,000 acres of our suitable timber base, those lands that are designated in our forest plan as where that are suitable for timber harvest, are inside of inventoried roadless areas. And so you can see that presents some significant complexities for us as we look to complete effective treatments across the landscape, whether those are timber harvest or fuels projects. So with 50% of your suitable timber base, essentially with limited access. Now, what I would say is when inventory roadless doesn't mean it doesn't have roads in it. It doesn't mean it's never been, utilized for active forest management. It was designated, back in that 2001 rule as a result of decades of planning, probably information that Representative Hageman shared. She has a great history and knowledge of the rule and its development. But we have, across the Bighorn National Forest, we have approximately 300 miles of roads within inventoried roadless areas. While some of those roads are open and used by the members, used by the public, used for active management, we have a limited ability to treat forests in inventoried roadless. And so a change in the roadless rule, whether it's a full rescission of the roadless rule or additional exemptions that will allow for timber harvest, would be, monumentally beneficial to us as we try to make a difference in the landscape. I know that, well, those are some specific details on the Bighorn. I know that my peers on the Medicine Bow and the Bridger Teton have really quite similar situations. Significant portions of those forests are also inventoried roadless, where we are all, maximizing our use of the existing exemptions in the rule to treat lands, but we can't touch it all. And that makes it difficult to make a meaningful difference out there when, we have one of our key tools is not available to us.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask, is there going to be any recommendations coming forward from you guys? I would assume you would want to see more roads, more ability to harvest some of those areas, but I don't want to speak for you guys, but you will have an opportunity to comment on that as well.
We hope to have the opportunity to be able to provide that technical expertise as the changes are being put forth. Right now, we don't have anything substantive to comment on. We're going to need a little bit more direction, sir, and we look forward to an opportunity to give you updates on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If you're looking for direction, we want to harvest timber. We want to have products to sell, and we want to put people to work. So that's definitely something. Go ahead.
Copy that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chair, just real quick, I just want to add to that. We're in the broils of it's on the Caribou Targhee, but we're trying to see that a natural gas pipeline go through. And I like how you phrased that. It's advance the tools. It's not necessarily that we're going to go and build new road all over these places. There's a fallacy with the problem of these roads that appeared that are in the area that are not usable because they're in a roadless area. Now that just is mind-boggling in itself. But this pipeline, for example, goes right along the road, but right off the road is roadless area. And so that's what held it up. And it was held up for, 9 years now. And then just recently 3 months. And we're going forward with that. But the adaptations that you're able to make, hopefully with the new rules that you're making, will be so important to keep that going and stay away from the public impression. And you're not promoting this by any means, but some people think, oh, they're just going to go, D8 dozers are now going to run rampant on the forest. It's actually using the roads that we have, because there's a ton of that you can't touch. So anyway, point of emphasis there. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do you have a response?
Representative Erickson, I cannot speak to the pipeline that you mentioned in the Caribou Target. I'd be happy to look into that since that's in a region outside of my scope. But that will be one of the many do outs that I'm sure we'll have from this meeting. And I cannot speculate because we don't necessarily know in what direction the rescission is going to go, but I can imagine that the administration is going to be looking for alignment between its executive order around timber, the direction that we received on the National Active Management Strategy from the Secretary as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Dockstader.
I don't have comment either way on the pipeline, but I always like to declare that I'm a member of the board that's the co-op that's working on that, just for the record.
All right, well, you let us know if we need to help you. Because you can't. I know you can't, but we can, so. Co-Chairman Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Yeah, this is just a comment. You know, our last meeting, you referenced Congresswoman Hegeman spoke on the roadless rule, and it was actually on June 19th. And this committee was asking her, you know, she got a nationwide injunction on this in a lawsuit, the Clinton roadless rule of 2001, I guess they call it. And we need to just keep talking about this stuff because this article in the Cowboy State Daily was only 4 days later after our meeting where Agriculture Secretary Brooke Shields lifted the roadless rule 4 days after we had all of that conversation in Pinedale. So, yeah, it's kind of fun that we had that conversation and 4 days later, our wish came true, so to speak. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So you guys keep delivering like that.
Thank you, Chairman Knight. I will take that feedback back.
Thank you. Any other questions for the Forest Service? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The next thing on the agenda is public comment. If there's anybody in the room that'd like to talk about the roadless rule or had questions that weren't answered. Nobody's online, I'm assuming. Okay. We're just clipping along. 3 o'clock and 2:30. Look at that. The 3 o'clock item is payment in lieu of taxes. Oh, sorry, Joe, I didn't see.
That's
You snuck right up
I-
on me, man. You're just quiet.
Well,
Go ahead, sir.
thank you anyway for letting me speak. Well, welcome to Johnson County, first of all. And I would like to follow up on some of how important it is that they do have to deal with this roadless thing. It's really been a problem for a long time. The other thing too is the Good Neighbor Authority. I don't know, there's been a lot of comment on it today, but I'm not sure you guys realize how much work the state forestry puts into this. And I mean, it really takes away from all the other stuff that they're doing and things like that. And so staffing is really going to be an issue in the future as people go forward and there's more of this. And the thing that they do best with it is they take these sales, I was explaining to you that they take them and they package them so they can sell them. Because a lot of times all the stuff is put out there, they draw lines around it and put it up, and some of you guys are firsthand knowledge of this, and yeah, I mean, you couldn't sell it to anybody. It may be the work you want to do, but you got to design these sales around being able to sell them to somebody because there's not enough industry left to come and buy them anyway. So that's kind of one of the most important points, but that really takes work. They spend a lot of time and effort. And at the community level with your district foresters, they're out there with your Chamber of Commerce, your local folks, and actually being able to generate the interest in it so they will get bought. So I just wanted to comment on that and make sure that everybody knows that the buck does stop with state forestry and they're doing a great job with it. So anyway.
They are. Thanks for your comments. Okay, so with that, we'll toss it back to Legislative Services to talk about the PILT program.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Don Richards from LSO will be presenting on Zoom on this topic.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of
Morning,
the Mr. Chairman, members. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to appear remotely. My name is Don Richards. I'm the Budget and Fiscal Administrator for the Legislative Service Office. And responding to some queries on the PILT program from the co-chairman through Councillor Hanson, I have prepared a memo for the committee. I believe it is in your packet, listed as attachment 801. And with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll walk through the contents of that memo and hopefully answer several of the questions that you posed.
Yes, please.
Well, the PILT program was initiated in 1977 in order to help local governments offset losses in property taxes due to the existence of non-taxable federal lands. Since the inception, Wyoming has received more than $775 million, or more than $750 million over the last 47 years. Unlike many federal funds, PILT funds do not pass through the state of Wyoming. They go directly from the federal government to each individual county. In attachment B on page 2, it shows that the amount provided to the state of Wyoming for all counties is $37.3 million per year. In fact, Wyoming benefits from 5.8% of the total distribution from the federal government on an annual basis. We have the 9th highest allotment of all states, largely due to our size and the amount of federal lands contained therein. To give you a little bit of a sense of how impactful this is for Wyoming counties, Natrona County receives the most at $4.6 million. Sweetwater County receives $4.2 million, and Fremont County receives $3.6 million. All three of those counties have several attributes in common. Number one, they're large. Those are our 3 large counties. Number 2, there's a lot of federal land in each of those counties. And then finally, there is a larger population base for each of those counties as well. In contrast, Laramie County, where I'm speaking from today, receives just $38,000 per year, largely due to the lack of federal land. Goshen County similarly receives less than $100,000 per year. I did some additional analysis just for the members of this select committee. And on a per acre basis, there is quite a bit of variation. Uinta County, represented by the chair, receives $3.39 for each qualifying federal acre, the highest among the state, among you as members. Next, Natrona County receives $3.13 an acre. Lincoln County receives $1.17, so quite a drop off there to Lincoln County. And then Sweetwater County receives 91 cents per federal acre. And then finally, Park County receives just 78 cents per qualifying federal acre. It's important to note that not all federal lands qualify for PILT. So in Laramie County, where I am speaking from, the F.E. Warren Air Force Base, for example, does not qualify for PILT payments. PILT payments are typically related to Department of Interior or Department of Agriculture lands. Think BLM, National Park Service, and Forest Service comprise the vast majority of all qualifying lands. Through Councillor Hanson, there were a number of questions posed, and I'll try to address several of those now. There was an inquiry about where the rules are and who is responsible for the distribution of these funds. The Department of Interior Office of Secretary is responsible for promulgating those rules, which were last done in 2004. At this same year, the program was actually transferred within the Department of Interior away from the BLM, or Bureau of Land Management, and into the Office of the Secretary, giving it a higher prominence. There were also questions about who might audit those payments, and there are several entities that have a hand in this. First of all states must certify the amount of offsetting federal funds, and Wyoming's governor has designated that task to the Wyoming Department of Audit. Once they receive that data, the Inspector General within the Department of the Interior also oversees payments. The Governmental Accountability Office, GAO, at the federal level can, upon request, involve themselves in auditing. And then on the local expenditure of funds, the local third-party auditors that audit all of the counties as part of their audits are involved in overseeing the expenditure of these funds. While not an audit, I should mention that the Ag Extension agents, the University of Wyoming Ag Extension agencies, have a history of computing and really recreating the Department of Interior's methodology by county as another check, although not a formal audit, on the distribution of these funds. The methodology is complicated, but when reduced to its basic level, there are 5 inputs for PILT payments. First of all, and these are listed on the top of page 2 of the memo, the number of federal eligible acres. Second, the population. And when it comes to population, this is broken down in 3 ways. If the population of the county is below 5,000, so think Niobrara County, for example, the actual population is used. If the population is between 5,000 and 50,000, it's rounded to the nearest 1,000. And all population in the county is capped at 50,000. That certainly impacts counties like Natrona and Laramie County here, but it has a significant impact on the California counties, where the population factor is also capped at 50,000. The third variable in the formula is the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, which does provide for inflation adjustments to the formula on an annual basis. The fourth variable is offsetting federal revenue, and that is revenue that comes to the county from the federal government is often deducted from the amount of PILT payments. This is a very important concept and will be discussed in further detail later. And fifth and finally, the last ingredient in this computation is the level of the congressional appropriation. At some points, the Congress appropriates less funds than the formula provides, and then all counties are reduced proportionally. In terms of the distribution of funds, the calculation is really a 3-part calculation, and there is a visual depiction of this on page 3 of the memo. In short, the number of acres is multiplied against a set amount for the standard calculation, and then compared against a ceiling payment multiplied by the population of the county. Once those 2 payments are determined, the lesser of those 2 is taken, and prior year federal payments are reduced from that amount. That prior year federal payments is an important concept, and again, I will speak to that later. This is described as the standard calculation. There is also a minimum calculation, which is the number of acres times a much lower value per acre, and it is also compared against the population ceiling payment, and the lesser of those 2, the acres or the population ceiling payment, is then chosen. Finally, the greater of the standard payment or the minimum payment is determined, and that becomes the payment eligible for each county, and then it is simply prorated based on the case if the Congress appropriates less funds than the formula calls for. PILT payments are not adjusted for the actual costs. So if there is significant road maintenance, wildfires, federal construction, a tourism event, counties do not receive more money based upon any external activity. However, they are the formula does adjust itself annually related to the CPI or inflation. So another question that the co-chairs posed is, well, what options does the state have to best position Wyoming to receive the maximum amount of funding available? Well, the first one is obvious, and the National Association of Counties is very active in this area, and that is to prevail upon the members of Congress to appropriate the full amount. In years where either those payments are delayed due to congressional inaction, or whether Congress does not appropriate the full amount, counties are left with significant uncertainty. In fact, the Wyoming Association of County Commissioners, in its budget manual, recommends that counties estimate their future PILT payments on 70% of their prior year, assuming that that 30% could be a reduction that is unknown at the time they build their budgets at the federal level. So planning is uncertain, there are delayed in payments, and there is certainly some inconsistency as you look in attachment B. Over time, the annual amounts are not consistent. What other options are available to you? And this gets into the deduction of prior year federal payments. Federal mineral royalties, Forest Reserve payments, and Taylor Grazing Act payments are all reduced from a county's PILT payment. And in 1995, your predecessors addressed the largest one of those by far, which is the FMRs, or federal mineral royalties. You will note when Craig releases their distributions that counties receive no money from federal mineral royalties. There was a design behind that, because every dollar the state gives in federal mineral royalties to counties would be reduced for their PILT payments. So there's a strong incentive not to give FMRs to counties. And in 1995, your predecessors felt similarly, and you will see counties benefit from severance taxes, but they do not benefit from FMRs. This gives a great advantage for Wyoming counties to maximize their PILT payments. But there are some other areas where Wyoming has not taken these steps. Wyoming receives $4.5 million per year in Forest Reserve payments. These payments could be deducted at the county level or the state level and directed to another entity, for example, schools. And statewide, the state would be better off, but each county may be better or worse off. So we have presented this as an option, and you will see the statute replicated as an attachment or an addendum to the memo. Attachment A, the bottom of page 2, Wyoming Statute 9-4-504, the last sentence reads, not less than 5% of the money shall be credited to either one of the funds, and either one of the funds in that sentence refers to the county fund or the general school fund. Counties have elected to put 95% in the county fund and 5% at the school fund. And that's by design. I mean, they would be reducing their own budgets if they didn't take the maximum amount. However, that statute could be rewritten such that the $4.5 million in reserve payments would be distributed to non-county entities, special districts, cities and towns, K-12, for example. However, in order to make everybody whole, it would take a fair bit of changes for the distribution formula for FMRs, severance taxes, and even at the end of the day, some counties would end up better off and some counties would end up worse off. There would be no guarantee that the growth of these revenue streams in future years would match each other. PILT payments don't follow severance tax payments or FMR payments, for example. So those are the options that we've identified. Your predecessors have concluded that the revisions to that statute would, while they would in total benefit the state by about $4 million, were not compelling enough to generate any support. You may feel differently. I'd be happy to answer any questions or comment further if you have any.
Thank you, Don, for presenting that. Does the committee have any questions? Go ahead, Co-Chairman Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Mr. Richards, thank you very much. This is an excellent report to get us all schooled on this. And I had a few questions regarding, these PILT payments started in 1977. And that was actually the same year that our federal mineral royalty payments went from 37.5% to 50%. You did a report for me about a year ago on federal mineral royalty payments, and that was a good spreadsheet to kind of get, to understand the history of federal mineral royalty as well, and, to tie this into PILT payments. Could you comment on what happened in 1976 or 77 where we got an increase of 37.5% on federal mineral royalty to 50%, and then we instituted PILT payments that same year? Do you know what all went on in Congress at that particular point in time to, help the state of Wyoming? Actually, there was a big boost from the feds that particular year. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. I do believe that they were separate endeavors, unrelated to each other. Any connection in terms of timing, I don't think were related to anything between those two revenue streams, the PILT payment stream and the FMR payment stream. The FMR payment stream have been negotiated and worked by Wyoming's congressional delegation for decades in efforts to increase those payments. And I think one could accurately say that the increase to 50% had a significant role from Wyoming's congressional delegation. The PILT payments, on the other hand, Wyoming, I should say, receives the largest amount of onshore federal mineral royalty payments of any state. Occasionally, New Mexico, with their natural gas development, is certainly approaching Wyoming and may even surpass Wyoming recently. But historically, Wyoming has actually four solid great minerals: coal, oil, natural gas, and trona, whereas most other states only have one or two of those four minerals. So Wyoming has an outsized share of federal mineral royalties. Payment in lieu of taxes really impact almost every state, including eastern states, do have small amount of acres that are eligible for PILT. It is a much more national discussion than FMRs. And like I indicated, Wyoming is 9th. And I don't know the history on why in 1977 PILT generated such an interest to recognize the inability of Western states primarily to tax federal lands and the negative financial impacts associated with that.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Go ahead, Chairman Ide.
I'll hit one more here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through your discussion, and I know in the past when, during the Obama administration, they shut down the government for a period of time, and they were holding us hostage on our FMR payments. Number one, they were kind of sitting on those, and and I don't know if anything in particular happened at that time with PILT as well, but a lot of this, especially through your discussion today, it sounded like these funds are not etched in stone for sure. I mean, it sounds like almost Congress or even the president can make executive orders and cut us off about any time they want to with both of these. Would you comment on that, or what's your thoughts on that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Ide. A couple of comments on that. You're exactly right in that both revenue streams are susceptible to congressional action and even the executive branch interpretation of the congressional action. Wyoming's PILT payments, starting in the mid-2000s, around 2006, 2007, began an administrative fee associated with the PILT payments. All of that fee comes out of Wyoming's share, or Wyoming's 50% share. And since the implementation of that fee, Wyoming has not received any relief from that. So we've been paying that 1% fee for just shy of 20 years, about 18 years. In addition, as you mentioned, due to the reduction in all federal spending, our FMR payments are now sequestered. So about 6.5% of all of our federal mineral royalty payments are sequestered. And that continued for about a year and a half. And Senator Enzi at the time, who I believe was chair of the Budget Committee, prevailed on an interpretation that Wyoming's FMRs should not be subject to the sequester. And his argument did prevail with a twist. And that twist is the federal government continues every month to sequester 6.5% of Wyoming's share of FMRs. And then each October, all of that sequestered funds for the prior year is repaid to the state. So it kind of is a flow of funds, but over time on the sequester, Wyoming receives exactly what it should receive. It's kind of in my opinion, a unnecessary shuffling of funds. But nonetheless, Wyoming did prevail in that argument. Our funds are sequestered, but then they are repaid at the end of each fiscal year, beginning of the next fiscal year. With respect to PILT payments, once again, you are absolutely correct. And you can even see that in attachment B and attachment C. You will see a fair bit of uncertainty and variability on the available funds. While it has been somewhat consistent, certainly counties are uncertain of the funds that are going to be available to them when there are government shutdowns or across-the-board reductions. And this makes it difficult to plan financially at the federal or at the county level because of the uncertain federal action. So both of these are susceptible to revision. I would also offer that the PILT payments tend to have more broader support across a larger number of senators and a larger number of states, whereas FMR payments, challenges to those FMR payments, Wyoming has a smaller group of beneficiary friends, if you will.
Yeah, go ahead. Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Co-Chair. So I guess I didn't realize, that's a good point you brought up. There's still sequestering 6%, or I can't remember what the number was. And they hold that until the following October or whatever, then they make that payment. How do we unwind that, or is there a way to unwind that through Congress? I mean, it seems like, they're kind of holding us hostage on a portion of it for no particular reason anymore. Before it was because of a government shutdown, essentially is when that occurred. So is there a way to, or what would your comments be on a way to unwind that withhold? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Ide, Congress could adopt an alternative approach and remove, I believe it was around 2012, that reconciliation budget. I'll have to look that up. It was 2012 or 2013 where I believe they began the sequestering. As you might imagine as an observer of Congress, it has been more than a decade since we've had a budget under the regular order. That means 12 separate budgets by subject area, defense, interior, judiciary, and the like, and that all of those individual bills have not continued. Oftentimes, Congress is appropriating under a continuing resolution based upon what amount was received in prior years. While it is an administrative waste of time for both the federal accountants and the state accountants, the sequester, at the end of the day, it does not affect us. But it would be nice to clean that up, but it would require a clean base, not going back to that 2012, 2013 base. And it would require movement of federal budgets under their regular order. Since it does not, at the end of the day, have a negative impact on the total amount Wyoming receives, in terms of a priority, there may be other efforts, for example, advocating for full funding for PILT, or advocating for elimination of the administrative fee on FMRs, or advocating for a higher percentage of FMRs to the states, would actually generate a better financial outcome for the state.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman, Co-Chairman. Any other questions from the committee? I appreciate it. That was one of the questions that I had. Was I wanted to know a little bit more on how this PILT is calculated. I guess one of the factors that it seems like to me that was overlooked, it's payment in lieu of taxes. So they're compensating the western states that they made a decision. They changed the rule where they were going to dispose of federal lands. They were going to retain that, and they started paying this PILT program where we got payment in lieu of taxes. But one of the things that I think has been lost in all of this is just due to the nature of the fact that we can't develop our state like other states. It's not just the lost revenue. We've not been able to grow our population base. And I look at the fact that we have one representative in Congress, and as everybody knows, the representation in Congress is based on the number of people that live in your state. And I really wonder what we can do to maybe highlight that a little bit more, because I do think that's been something that nobody has really looked at. But the fact that we can't develop half of our state, it's impeded the state's ability to grow. And by having that inability, we do not have the same representation in Congress as other states. I mean, we're one of the largest states. I mean, we're not the largest, but we are a fairly large state, as you mentioned, and we do get benefits in the PILT program because of that. But I guess that's one of the things that I don't feel like has ever been really addressed, is how our inability to develop the lands within our border and populate those lands, how that's handicapped us as far as our representation in Congress. And I don't know if you've thought any about that. I mean, I know, Dawn, this is probably the first time you've heard that, but it's one of those things that in the back of my head, I've really wondered, what the state could do to try to get better representation, or I should say better, because I think we have one of the best representatives in Congress. I always joked with Representative Lummis that there's a reason they only let Wyoming have one congressman, because we keep sending people like her and Harriet, and we'd run the country if they let us have 2 or 3 more representatives like like we've been sending there. But I don't know, I don't know if that's just something I've thought about. The committee might think I'm nuts, but I just wondered if you had any comments on that, Don.
Mr. Chairman, indeed, that is the first time I've heard it characterized in that manner, and I think that manner of thinking has some merit. It certainly, I'm starting to think about that a little differently. I would offer maybe a couple of cautions or observations. One observation is, in addition to the lands, the mineral resources arguably have tremendous value and are even a larger share of federal ownership, which comes with additional challenges. And you can see that, to your comment, in a little different manner. I think you're talking about residential population, but you certainly can see that from my perspective on Craig, where companies choose to work in areas such as Texas or North Dakota, meaning deploy their capital in areas where they may not have to jump through the government hoops, in this case, the federal government hoops. So when they're coming up with their strategies, they certainly take that into account. And Texas and North Dakota have the benefit of much larger share of private ownership of minerals. When it comes to the lands itself, I think there are a range of extraordinary benefits, not only from public lands, but the revenue generated thereon. And I haven't certainly seen any analysis like that you have described, but I'll certainly be on the lookout for it now.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that response, and I do. I mean, I don't know. I know my assessor told me to tread lightly when I started asking about PILT, because she was aware of the fact that our county done fairly well. But I look at it, I mean, I think we need to represent the whole state, not just my county. So that's the reason I ask these questions. So just don't beat up my county too much, okay? Any other questions before we let Mr. Richards go? Okay, one more. Co-Chairman Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So, Mr. Richards, you mentioned the conversation, and you put it in your report here about looking to make the PILT permanent. Would you elaborate on that, and what is your reasoning behind that? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Ide. One of the areas, I think the terminology is mandatory payments. And at the federal level, there are two different types of funding. There is appropriations that are discretionary, and there are appropriations that are mandatory. And when you think about mandatory, think about Social Security, Medicare. Those tend to be mandatory style of payments. Discretionary would be like the annual budgets of the BLM, annual budgets of the Forest Service, which you've been speaking about today. It is certainly advantageous to be categorized in the mandatory category as opposed to the discretionary category. And it basically determines what share of the congressional debate you are participating in. And so there have been numerous attempts to make PILT mandatory. And in fact, a majority of the years in the past decade, it has been a mandatory payment, which means it is less subject to congressional revision. However, just like you know, as state legislatures, something is mandatory until it's not. And you can certainly change the statute to allow it to be discretionary. And in fact, Congress has, and I think I might have even included that on in the memo at some point. Oh yes, at the top of page 3, you will see that it has been funded entirely through mandatory appropriations for all years except for 2015, 2016, 2017. And then in 2015, it was both mandatory and discretionary. So even when you get that so-called protection of being a mandatory payment, it is not a full protection such that Congress can't go in and amend that to be discretionary at some later date. So it helps, but it is not a guarantee.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the status that Wyoming is in right now, you mentioned those years, 15, 16, goes back and forth. Is that at the will of Congress to determine whether it's discretionary or mandatory? And are we in the mandatory phase right now, or are we in the discretionary phase, or what is our status right now? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I believe you are in the mandatory stage now, and which is a positive one. But as you can also see, looking back about 10 years, just because you're in the mandatory category, which is the preferred category, doesn't mean you stay there every year. They can modify that. And an example of that you might resonate with you is the local government at the state level. You have a local government direct distribution, and technically that is not part of the standard budget, which in the state's nomenclature would be discretionary. But you can change that back and forth. And I'm sure the local governments listening to this now, cities, towns, and counties, would like to have more certainty. And that's the same kind of discussion that goes on at the congressional level as to whether or not each Congress is going to change or have the opportunity to change the annual appropriation, or whether or not it is more protected.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Richards from the committee? Not seeing any. The next item on the agenda was public comment, and I don't know, is Jeremiah? Okay, Jeremiah wants to log in, so if you could admit him, and thanks, Mr. Richards.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I was mostly here to be a resource as you had a conversation about this important topic. It's even though we might fall into one of those mandatory categories, we've never looked at it that way because of the volatility of this particular source of funding. In fact, our national association hosts a PILT fly-in every year in which Wyoming County commissioners, as well as other commissioners from across the country, participate in that conversation to protect what we feel is a government responsibility, a federal government responsibility back to the states and counties across the country for the fact that there is so much undevelopable federal land within their jurisdiction. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you might have. I did hear a little bit of talk about the Secure Rural Schools program or the Forest Reserve program. When you're talking about volatility, there is some incredible volatility in that particular area. In 2017, payments were reduced by 68% on average across the state. In fact, moving forward, because it hasn't been reauthorized, when we put out our revenue estimating manual to counties this year, I actually put a 0 in the fiscal year 26 column because we have no confidence that that particular program is going to remain long-term. And in fact, we saw some reductions this last year. Just as an example, relative to some of your counties, Park County Their Secure Rural School Program funding went from $761,000 down to $183,000. If we look at Sublette County, they received over $593,024. This year, $187,000. Carbon County, not as dramatic as those, but it went from $281,000 to $174,000. Those things have an impact on budgets and are important, and we work diligently at the federal level to try and protect, again, what we believe is a federal government responsibility back to Western states that hold so much federal land, and given all the services that we provide on those federal lands. But one last thing that I'll say, Mr. Richards is absolutely right. If you look at PILT, it is designed to be a long-standing program, and we think it should increase. The Secure Rural School Program, by its design, is actually intended to ultimately decrease over time, although we see some important reasons that it should be reauthorized. And finally, Representative or Chairman Wharf, you're close to this, but the state of Utah recently went through a process to try and better analyze the federal lands in their jurisdiction to understand what value is lost in relationship to the PILT payments. And I think that data ultimately will be really important as we continue to work at the federal level to increase those PILT payments. With that, Mr. Chairman, I've probably said too much, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. There any questions for Mr. Ryman? And you guys are letting him off easy. You did a good job there in silence, Jeremiah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that there's any directives. I'm looking for any directives from the committee, but if you guys have any ideas or any suggestions, I mean, it is a little troubling to me that this is a substantial amount of money that could disappear tomorrow just because somebody decided in Congress to take that away.
Mr. Chairman, what's your ultimate goal with this? I'm trying to track what
Well, I'm
what's
just,
your interest for a reason?
yeah, whether or not we should be doing something to encourage Congress to make that more permanent is my question, you know. Don Richards mentioned several options that we could pursue, and I guess I'm just wondering if we want to go down that avenue. And I'm not looking for anything today. I mean, I just think it's something we need to think about. It is troubling to me to think that they could on a whim just decide they're not going to honor that. You know, I think I obviously have my biased opinions about, you know, the federal lands and the decisions that they made in 1976 to retain those lands rather than to dispose of them as the Constitution directed. But I don't know what the flavor is of the committee, but I do think, you know, to have all that at risk, and obviously it's nothing we can change, but we do have a congressional delegation that we can bend their ear, we can encourage them, and I just really wanted to have the committee learn about the PILT, because that's one of the things that I've always heard. And if you weren't at our meeting, we had Commissioner Conley said that Lincoln County got 30 cents on the dollar is what they got. And I haven't had a chance to visit with him further about that. I'd like to kind of figure out how he's coming up with that money, that dollar amount, because obviously it's you know, there's a lot of ways to skin that cat, and I think it's up to us to look at it. I thought it was interesting when I went and talked to my assessor. The money just shows up and there's no accounting. That's why I asked if it's audited. You know, because I mean, the way I understand it, this money just shows up, the county gets it, and as Mr. Richards explained, they sequester 6%, 6.5% that they retain. Then they release that in October, and it does hit their budgets at I guess it's probably nice in some counties because it's a flush of income that they wouldn't have otherwise received. But budgeting, I mean, I can't imagine. I had the opportunity to sit with the budget cuts that we implemented in the counties. I got to sit in on all the discussions in my county, and that is an issue that was brought up by my county, is just the complexity of not knowing that they find out in October, you know, when they get their final check. But I just thought this is something that we should think about. And like I said, I don't know that I wasn't really looking for anything today, but I think there's a lot of people. I look around the room. I think you guys are pretty smart. I think we need to think about it and see if we can't come up with some type of an action plan. Like I said, I'm not looking to do anything this year. I think with us being in a budget session next year, it's probably going to be pretty hard to do something as extreme as what I think we need to do.
Yeah.
But it is something. Senator Dr.
I see your concerns. Our county, my particular county, trending downward to $1.17 per acre, as noted from Mr. Richards' report, is a concern. There's a thought. If we're going to do something, though, I don't know that we'll ever have a DC delegation as strong as we have now.
Yep.
So we should probably consider something sooner rather than later if you would like to take some direction. I don't know that a budget year throws it off too much. I've seen us do a lot of things in budget years. This could be one of them.
Well, and I'm not afraid of a fight. If it's a fight I think we can win, you guys know I'm willing to jump in and fight. And I think everybody on this committee, I think, are fighters. So I'm willing to go down that path. If you guys want to go there, I'll lead the charge, because I do think we need to do something to strengthen. I mean, I've always thought Wyoming was a sovereign state, and I don't see us acting like a sovereign. Chairman Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Yeah, I'm glad that, you know, we got this information from Don. It helped me a lot. It's good to see the dollar amounts, you know, the CPI escalations, just to understand. I guess I still don't understand why, you know, all of a sudden in 1977, we started getting PILT payments. You know, what the government can give you, they can take it away just as easy. And whatever we can do to strengthen our hand on PILT payments with Congress is probably what we should be doing here. This is part of our job. You know, Mr. Riemann mentioned Utah doing a value lost as a result of PILT in Utah. I should have asked him. I don't know what that, you know, would entail, the value lost of PILT. I mean, is that as a result of the state not having, you know, sovereignty and jurisdiction over those lands, or what does that mean exactly? But you know, I did a little with the numbers that you got and that Richard got us last week. It looks like, relatively speaking, if you compare PILT payments to taxes on rangeland, we're getting a fair deal, it appears to me. Just, I did my local county and looked at a few others, knowing the number of federal acres and what rangeland per acre, you know, taxes are on rangeland, just to do sort of a back into it to see if the PILT payments were a fair shake, or are we really getting, you know, pennies in lieu of trillions, as the old saying goes. So as far as that goes, it doesn't look like we're really getting hurt. if all of these BLM lands were taxed as rangelands, we're probably getting maybe in some cases more than we would otherwise on if it was private and in you know, an ag designation. So, but that still doesn't you know, get us to where I'm just kind of rambling here a little bit. I think, you know, if this PILT payment went away, it would be a pretty big hit. I mean, it's $37 million statewide, I think, for 2025. And I know in our county, Natrona, you know, all of our property taxes total, excluding PILT, are about 17 million. And Natrona looks like they're the biggest beneficiary of this at $4.6 million in PILT. That's close to 20% of our tax budget in Natrona County, if you throw those two together. Yeah, and divide it by $4,600,000. So, yeah, I'm open for what do we do to strengthen our hand with Congress to make this forever more mandatory until they transfer the lands to the state and we can decide what we're going to do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I came back on, sir. Mr. Chairman.
Okay, can you let Jeremiah back in, please? Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. To the extent that I can help clarify my comment there, what Utah was trying to understand is, you know, you receive so much in PILT. If that was taxable state property, private property, et cetera, what would you get in that equation? And what they found, and I'm just reading one statistic from their report, is that Utah receives more property tax in 6 days from its 21% of taxable lands than it receives in an entire year from 65% of non-taxable lands. So in other words, they found that the PILT payments were undervalued in relationship to the actual taxable value of that federal land.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Raymond. You know, and I think, yeah, you'd have to look at the data on that. I'm sure they're probably taking in, you know, residential, commercial. My comment was, I was looking at what the state of Wyoming was getting on average for agricultural, just rangeland per acre versus what, if you break this down per acre versus, you know, do a contrast of those two, and it looks pretty decent on paper from my analysis. If you just strictly, you know, contrast it with rangeland, and, you know, ag taxes are very low in the state of Wyoming. I'm sure they are in the state of Utah as well. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Ryman.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I absolutely agree. As I understand the Utah analysis, it did look at it as if it was ag federal land, then they were evaluating the tax structure there. If it was mineral development, recreational land, they looked at it in relationship to its current status. But I'm certainly happy to get you more information if that's helpful.
Mr. Chairman, could we get that information? And Jeremiah, if I could, if that's all right with
Go
you.
ahead, Mr.
Is there a consensus among your counties what direction they want to go with? They want to go with PILT? They want to take another direction? Do they want us to sit down with the DC delegation and work on something for the future? Your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Senator Dockstader, I think what I'm really excited about is that we would have a partner in the conversations that we've been having with our delegation for a number of years and with our colleagues from across the country. It is a serious issue. We do feel that the payments are not adequate in relationship to the cost of services provided and their otherwise taxable value if they weren't federal lands. So, you know, we would certainly welcome that support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Good, Co-Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, those are good comments from Mr. Raymond. And Senator Dockstader. And all I looked at, just to be clear, was just the surface. It didn't, take in anything else as far as what we're losing in mineral development. And, we are getting our federal mineral royalties, but we're not getting all of it. And so if you factored in 100%, if the lands were all Wyoming lands instead of federal lands. So I was just comparing it strictly on the surface, tax per acre compared to PILT, pure and simple. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, I think that gave us something to think about, which is what I wanted to do is just highlight that. And part of that's probably because I have been in communication with some of the people in Utah, and I don't want to speak about things I don't know, but I do know that I've had some very interesting conversation with them, and I believe if we could look at the analysis the way Utah did, we would find the same thing. And I know that's kind of what I was told just on a cursory look. And I know I've got some data that I have not been authorized to share with this committee. I'll have to see if they would care if I shared that. But I know the stuff that I looked at, it did look to me like, even though 37 million is a lot, I don't think it's anywhere near. If you look at what we should be able to get, if those lands, and this is the way I'm looking at it, just so the committee understands, if we looked at the federal government as nothing more than another landowner, what they would have to be paying in taxes, that's how I understand Utah did that. And so that means severance taxes, that means royalties, means all that. And when I looked at the documentation that they shared with me, it does appear to me that there's been things that have happened since 1977. We've had all kinds of growth, interest, all kinds of things, and I'm not so sure that the PILT payment program has kept up with that. They supposedly upgrade that, update it. But I'm really thinking that there's been some minutia, some data that's been lost as far as what the state should actually be able to tax if those lands were actually under private ownership, which that's how I know they looked at it. And I know if I put my colored glasses on that remove them from being Big Brother, if they're just treated as any other landowner, I think we would be getting much more than $37 million. So, but I will see if I can share that information with the committee, because you guys are pretty smart people, and I think it helps. I've learned it helps having eyes that look at things from different perspectives, different objectives. You might be able to see things that I'm not seeing.
Mr. Chairman, if we could get that from you, and if Jeremiah is still listening, if we could get his Utah report as well.
Okay.
And I don't think it would be out of line for you or co-chairs maybe to have some counsel with representatives from our DC delegation just to see their thoughts.
Okay. And I would definitely explore that. I think that's good for us to have any interaction we can have with our congressional delegation. I mean, I know they're fighters, and I think, as you mentioned, I think we're probably in one of the strongest positions the state's been in quite a while.
So we are, for a state of 500,000 people, we are.
Yes, we are. With that then, no other comments from the committee. We will move forward. We're just about back on time again for dam construction and expansion update. Everybody good if we move forward, or we need to take a break? Yeah, let's knock her out of the park. Couple of familiar faces for us.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jason Mead, the Director of the Wyoming Water Development Office.
Good afternoon. I'm Brandon Gebhardt, State Engineer.
And after a phone call with Chairman Worf, I think you guys are wanting to understand what are we doing in Wyoming to build reservoirs, and then also just a little bit about what's going on with Fontenelle Reservoir. So I'll do my best to be brief. I know it's getting late in the afternoon here. So just a quick talk about the Dam and Reservoir Division within the Water Development Program, and then the process we go through, and then I'll touch real high level on some current projects we're working on, and then State Engineer Gebhardt will fill us in on Fontenelle Reservoir. So we have three accounts for the Water Development Program: Account 1, Account 2, and Account 3. Account 1 is our new development account. So that is funds for, say, the storage tanks, for municipal water storage tanks, water transmission pipelines, things like that. Account 2 is rehabilitation, which is rehabilitation of those types of projects, as well as rehabilitation of irrigation projects, diversion structures, putting ditches into pipe, different things like that. And then Account 3 is our Dam and Reservoir Program. And that was set up in 2005. And basically the criteria associated with that is we can build reservoirs 2,000 acre feet or larger, new reservoirs, or enlargements of existing reservoirs of 1,000 acre feet or more. And when they first set that account up in 2005, they started it with some seed money. They had, I think it was roughly $54 million from the Account 1, and then $10 million from the Budget Reserve account to get that going. And then since that time, all of our accounts, I should say, are funded through mineral severance taxes, so coal, oil, natural gas, as you guys well know. The dollar amount that our percentages for each one of those counts comes from is capped at $155 million. So for instance, Account 3, our Dam and Reservoir account, gets 0.5% of $155 million every year. So that equates to $775,000. And whether or not the revenue is $450 million or $155 million, it's the same amount of revenue. It's capped at that 155. So unless that goes down, then of course, then our accounts would suffer. So current unappropriated dollars in Account 3 for dams is roughly $55 million. And we are a sponsor-driven program. So we take applications from towns, communities, different types of special districts in agriculture, irrigation districts, watershed improvement districts, water conservancy districts as examples. And basically, the process we go through once we get an application for a reservoir is, and we've got, just a quick backup, 3 different levels of studies. So we have our level 1 studies, which are kind of a reconnaissance, very high level look at something. Level 2, which is more of a feasibility analysis, and level 3 is our construction of an actual project. So I'll jump kind of into the feasibility analysis. Thinking about NEPA, we have a sponsor that comes to us. A lot of times it's an agricultural sponsor looking for late season supplemental irrigation water because the creek dries up and there's no water to irrigate with. So the general concept, obviously, of a reservoir is in the springtime when we've got more water than we can use. It's colder than, we want to put on our crop. Instead of seeing it go down to Montana in this case, we're going to try to put that in the reservoir for later use. So the first thing we do is a lot of hydrologic modeling to understand with the present day water right in most instances with the reservoir. We model all the existing diversion water rights, irrigation water rights, and other water rights. We understand, what's happening on the ground. So is it flood irrigation? What are the conveyance efficiencies in the ditch? Are they open ditch? Are they pipe? What are the return flow patterns? All those different types of things to really get a good handle on, is there a need? What is the shortage throughout the growing season? And then from there, we try to understand, okay, where is there available water within that same watershed? Using stream gauge data, and where there's not stream gauge data, we're using neighboring stream gauge data to more or less predict based on watershed size what we could expect for yields out of different tributaries. So with that, once we get an understanding of what the need is, then we start looking, okay, how can we meet that need with the different reservoir sites? And those come from the landowners that we've been working with from a particular district or that sponsor. It comes from old SCS and RCS type reports, Bureau of Reclamation sites, and really just scouring topo maps and understanding where's a good bucket, where's that available water to fill that bucket. And then we can actually run that model and understand, how can that over a period of record, say 50 years, if we have good hydrologic data that goes back that far, we can understand if that reservoir was operated in that past 50 years, how would it have alleviated shortages and get a better understanding of how well it's going to work within the system. So once we understand those things and all those different alternatives, really what we're doing is we're kind of doing the NEPA process in advance of the NEPA process. So from that, we develop a purpose and need statement, which is fundamental when you get into NEPA. And that's what sets the alternatives analysis in NEPA. So let's say we need 10,000 acre feet to, get a particular area fully watered for irrigation. Then we're going to start looking at all the different alternatives that can address those particular needs. And along with those alternatives, we're looking at all the environmental impacts associated with them. So how many wetland acres are associated with the inundation area of a particular dam, or cultural resources, or the geology and what's the technical feasibility of actually building that dam. If you're on karst material, which is soluble, you could end up with another anchor dam. I think we've all heard of that one, where you can't hold water. So you're looking at all the different components that go into a good reservoir site, both physically, technically, as well as when you get to permitting. From that point, then we narrow things down and understand, okay, this seems to be the best project out of, could be 10 or could be 35 or whatever alternatives that have been looked at. This one we think we can get permitted, and it does a good job of addressing the shortages in that particular area. So from there, then we need to get some boots on the ground. We go back, we get some additional funding, and we actually go out with drill rigs to punch holes in the ground to understand what we saw in the desktop analysis of bedrock and surface geology. Is that what we're seeing underground? And verifying some of that stuff for foundation conditions. We look in, we actually go out and delineate the wetlands to make sure that the National Wetlands Inventory maps were accurate and what types of wetlands that we're going to have to mitigate. We look at cultural resource surveys, different things like that to really verify the information that we did in that first analysis. So we're kind of refining data as we go. And if that's all positive and comes back good, and I should say, during this whole time, we're working with the community that we're trying to help and bringing them along, taking information back in public meetings and helping them understand what we're looking at. And a lot of times we have some kind of a, whether it be a watershed group, or if there's a district already formed, then that board's very involved, or we have a committee that's formed from a representative of the area that we're trying to help out. So they're along for the ride the whole way and bring up their local knowledge within these studies as well. Economics is another important piece of information we're looking at. How much does it cost? What are the benefits for the life of the project? If it's a dam that we expect to be around for 100 years before much has to be done to it, what are the economic benefits associated with that, both direct and indirect? You might grow an extra ton of alfalfa. What's the impact of that in your town? You might go to the hamburger joint 2 more times that month, or buy a new truck and different things like that. And then if all that looks positive, then we start down the permitting road with whatever federal agencies might be involved. And that oftentimes is the federal management, land management agency, Forest Service, BLM. Of course, the Corps of Engineers is always involved because they permit any dredge and fill in waters of the U.S., which, most dams involve waters of the U.S. and streams and creeks. And then other, EPA is always along for the ride too. So going through the NEPA process, getting permits in place. Once we have that, then we get into the design of the actual dam and then eventual construction. So that's the kind of process. It doesn't happen that quickly. There's a lot of 1 step forward and 2 step back, initially, but that's kind of why we do this. If we just said, hey, I want to go build this reservoir here, and then walk into the federal agency's office, and it's going to take significantly longer because they're probably going to go down a lot more rabbit holes than we would. But the other thing I wanted to talk about then was just generally what we're working on right now. We were successful in getting the Big Sandy Reservoir up north of Eden Farson enlarged by about 13,000 acre feet for the Eden Valley Water or Irrigation and Drainage District. We just reconstructed Middle Piney Reservoir, which is a reservoir up in the Bridger Teton National Forest out west of Big Piney, about 30 miles, high elevation, for the Middle Piney Watershed Improvement District. Levitt Reservoir, which is up north of Shell, Wyoming, so east of Grable, up Beaver Creek, north of Shell. We're actually in our last year of construction for that reservoir. That's going to be about a 6,600 acre foot reservoir. Alkali Creek Reservoir, which is in the same country in the Bighorn Basin. This is east of Anderson, west of Hyattville country. We're looking at about a 9,000 acre foot reservoir. All the permits are in place. Now we're just working with landowners that we need easements and things through, or that district, I should say, is working with those landowners. That's languishing a little bit, but I think we have a good path forward at this point. Another one we're looking at is out by Pinedale, New Fork Lakes. We're looking at enlarging that. And when I say enlargement, that's a small dam on a big natural lake or a very deep natural lake. And we're just looking at taking the outlet works down about 5.5 feet, which would gain another 8,000 acre feet of active storage. Another project we are working on is Silver Lake, which is out east of Boulder, Wyoming. That's actually in the wilderness area. And so we're working with the Forest Service very closely through an environmental assessment to understand the minimum tools requirements. And if anybody knows much about wilderness area, it is very difficult to do anything there. So that's been a process. Another one is West Fork Reservoir. So this is in the Little Snake River Basin, west of encampment, east of Savory-Dixon country, 10,000 acre foot reservoir. Going through the NEPA process right now. Fairly complex just because it involves the Forest Service and a potential land exchange. It involves the NRCS through a federal funding partner program. Of course, the Corps of Engineers and the EPA as well. So all those folks have a little bit different way of looking at NEPA. So that's been interesting. We're also in the feasibility analysis of a reservoir out south of town here called Bull Creek Reservoir. That's about 14,000 plus acre feet. Could potentially have some water for the town of Buffalo, as well as a lot of the irrigation districts and small districts here southeast of town and east of the interstate. And then also doing a feasibility study in the Wind River Range for the tribes. And then the last one is that we're just getting started on is for the Middle Poposia River. There's a couple of watershed improvement districts out there that are looking for late season shortage. And we're also looking at the town of Lander and kind of long-term regionalization type options. And if we can incorporate that all into a potential reservoir, then we're going to try to take a look at that. So those are the projects we're currently looking at. There's been numerous other projects that have fallen off for one reason or another over the years. But with that, if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer those. Or if you want, we can talk about Fontenelle real quick before we get to questions.
Yeah, if you want to talk about Fontenelle, we can talk about Fontenelle.
Okay. So a couple years ago, the legislature set aside some funding for the potential purchase of additional storage in Fontenelle. It's a 345,000 acre foot reservoir. Back in 1962 and 1974, we acquired 2 contracts the state of Wyoming did for 60,000 acre feet each. So we have 120,000 acre feet of storage right now in Fontenelle. And maybe I'll kick it to State Engineer Gebhardt for the rest.
Thanks, Jason. Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Jason mentioned the capacity of Fontenelle and what Wyoming currently has. There's one other contract in Fontenelle, and that's about 5,250 acre feet for the Seedskiddy project. But the remainder of that is largely, well, it is wholly uncommitted right now. So it is a little bit unique. And so, as Jason mentioned, we've been working with the Bureau of Reclamation and specifically the Provo area office to try to attempt to acquire some additional capacity in Fontenelle for the state of Wyoming. I think some of you may have heard some of the discussions we've had recently in the Colorado River Basin. Fontenelle has come up, maybe part of the reason for some of the questions and the interest or intrigue in what's going on with that. But within the basin, we were out the last 3-4 weeks working with the public, talking about a potential pilot conservation program. And as part of that program, and also as we're working with our Colorado River Advisory Committee, Fontenelle could play an important role in a conservation program for Wyoming. It could also play an important role for water banking or exchanges for those water users to give them some flexibility on how they can manage their water, protect juniors, try to avoid and mitigate involuntary reductions in the basin if it were ever to come to that. And so that's how we're approaching our discussions with Reclamation. And I will say Reclamation has been very good to work with. They've been very good because our biggest ask is we want to maximize the flexibility in anything we can contract for. They fully understand that. They're working with us, but that flexibility, I think, is not necessarily unique, but they truly understand why we want that. And so that is really our biggest effort, is to acquire probably as much as we think we can, and then also to have as much flexibility with Wyoming's contracted space in Fontenelle. And that's really what the main thing that we're trying to do with Fontenelle right now.
Mr. Gephardt, welcome to the committee. Do you know what the time frame is on when you're talking about maybe adding to that, to the dam, the Fontenelle, expanding that storage capacity, or can we expand it right now without making modifications to the dam?
Mr. Chairman, that's a good question. What we're talking about right now is existing storage, just uncontracted, uncommitted storage. So it wouldn't be a physical commit. It would just be contracting for that additional space in there. And so the process that we're under right now, Reclamation, to get the authority they need to formally negotiate for this, and this is somewhat standard in the way they do these contracts, but they're going through the process of establishing a basis of negotiation. And my understanding is that is working its way through Reclamation right now. I believe it's towards the end of that. I don't have a time frame for that, but it's not years away. It's weeks, months away.
Thank you. Did you have something to add, Jason?
Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, and I think Senator, I really moved up in the world.
Demote
State
them
engineer
already.
Gephardt. Yeah, come on now. So just the enlargement of Fontenelle Reservoir, and Chairman Wharf and I talked about this on the phone a little bit. Really, like state engineer said, it's not a physical enlargement. When they originally built that, they only took the riprap or the rocks on the front face of the dam down to a certain point. So in order to make that active in the future, we need to extend that riprap down a little bit further. And, we've looked at different ways to do that. And I think that at this point, the path forward is once we draw that down, we would place the riprap at that time instead of draining it prematurely or trying to drop, rocks off of a barge into the right place and different things like that. So.
Thank you. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many acre feet are we looking at in additional for the state of Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, we haven't landed on a firm number, but I think it's going to be between 100 and 140,000 acre foot potentially for us. Significant amount.
Yes, this is Fontenelle, right?
Correct. Just Fontenelle.
Follow up, Bob, or? Nope. Any other questions? Go ahead, Co-Chairman Iden.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I remember hearing conversation in the past, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I heard it wrong, but is the Bureau of Rec looking to divest a lot of their interests in the state to irrigation districts and that sort of thing? Is that something that is real, or did I hear things wrong? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chair, I don't know if it's a desire to divest. I would leave that up to them to answer that. But I know that there has always been a mechanism in which those federal projects could transfer to a district or to the end users. Whether or not that they're actively pursuing that or that's their desire, I couldn't speculate on that.
Mr. Gephardt, would that be something that the state requests? Or is that something that they would offer to the state? Do you know what that process would entail?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it would start with the user or the district or the project that would choose to do that. And I believe that there are probably different avenues for different types of projects. But it's my understanding that it would start with the user who's benefiting from that project or as part of that project would do that.
So they would make the request to the Bureau Rec, and then they would start the wheels as far as whether or not they turn it over to that entity or whether they retain it.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's correct. And I know that there has been some transfer of ownership for some of the projects in the state already.
Okay.
It's was originally set up that way that if they chose to do that, they could go through the defined process on how to do that.
Okay, thank you. And I know at lunchtime, somebody asked about LaPrel. Can one of you bring us up, give us kind of an update on where we're at with LaPrel?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So Loprel Dam, we're currently at about the 60% design phase. There's a construction manager at risk, so there's a joint venture contractor that has, I guess, been awarded that particular contract. So the CMAR process is as the design is finished by the engineers, they'll work directly with the contractor. Oftentimes you hear, contractors speaking badly about engineers and vice versa because everybody thinks they know how to do things best. So we get the best of both worlds. They work together and come up with the best design and the cheapest design. So working through that right now, they've got the 60% design done. They're trying to finish up NEPA and hoping to have the FONSI, or finding of no significant impact, through the environmental assessment sometime in October. This winter, or after irrigation season, they're going to try to start doing some site work, staging areas, road access, different things like that. Also, it's going to be a roller compacted concrete dam. So they're going to hopefully acquire the aggregate they need and start stockpiling that on site. All during that time, they're kind of finishing up some of the other design work with the intention to have that 90%, I think, in February, and then full design sometime early in the summer of next year. And then start in earnest on the actual roller compacted concrete in 2026, I believe. And then the intent is hopefully to have that completed and start storing a little bit of water in 2028, and then be finally completed in 2029, if I remember right.
Thank you. And I don't remember who asked that question, but if the committee has any more questions. No, I asked it at lunchtime. I asked it at lunchtime. I don't think so.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
So as far as the status of the dam that's coming down, or are the irrigators still able to get their water right now, or are they shut down at the moment? Thank you.
Chairman, Co-Chairman Ide. So that was decommissioned over the winter, basically, before spring runoff. So there's no dam anymore. There's just a low head kind of overfall. So the irrigators up there, unfortunately, don't have storage water. They're living off their direct flow water rights. And, it's not a great situation. So the faster we can get that dam built, the better. Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe talking about irrigation districts wanting to own a dam. I don't know up in my area if they're that excited about it. There's 4 districts that are part of that reservoir, and they all, when they first started, negotiated a contract to pay for their works and partial dam construction. And I think there's only one that's paid off. I think there might be 2, but I know Hart Mountain isn't there yet. They're 20 years away, I'll bet. But And usually they don't relinquish ownership until you paid that off, obviously. And usually it's a request by the irrigation district, if they want to take on the liability where, supposedly maybe the US government has a little, if things go bad, they may help, but, that's usually what happens.
Thank you, Senator Larson. I know one of the questions that I know when we were in session, and I don't know the answer, so I'm going to ask, but I know one of the concerns that I heard mentioned was the fact that the dam has been breached and that water is no longer available. I know there was some concern that a neighboring state may be able to claim their water. Have we done enough to protect their water right that it's not at risk?
Mr. Chairman, last year, the legislature passed an amendment to the abandonment statute that addressed situations like Laprelle. So that would protect it from the abandonment. And I do know that the district has applied to the Board of Control to enact that amendment to protect their abandonment. And I forget where it is in the Board of Control, whether it's approved or going through notices. But yes, that I believe that amendment to the statute protects the water from being abandoned.
That did take care of them good, because I know that was one of the concerns that I know was conveyed to me, and I just wanted to make sure. I thought that amendment had taken care of it, but I wanted to get some assurances that it was continuing to move forward and it was going the way we wanted, that it hadn't gotten off the rails. So
From my perspective, Mr. Chairman, it has, yes.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could correct
Yes.
something I said when we were talking about timelines, I looked at my notes now. Actual placement of the roller compacted concrete would start in 2027, not 2026. Probably be a lot of foundation prep in 2026, so.
Okay, so in total, what's the time, what is it from start to finish to complete a dam? Is
Mr.
it,
Chairman, that's a
I'm
good
sure it
question. It really-
depends on where you're starting, I'm sure, but.
Yeah, and the type of dam, we have earth and embankment dams and foundation conditions that sometimes you have to put some weight on them and let it sit for a while to consolidate before there's just all sorts of geotechnical different things. But I would say in general, 2 to 4 years, depending on the complexity,
Okay.
once you start construction.
And I was surprised. I know I hadn't really heard of any new dams being constructed, and that was one reason why I wanted to talk about it. Was I'm on me and Senator Larson are both on the Colorado River Compact group, and that was one thing I wondered, was if we had places where we should be looking to build additional dams. But I was surprised that is kind of an ongoing process throughout the state. So. But I still thought it was worthwhile to have, and we had talked about inviting the Bureau of Rec just because they are a federal partner, but it appears to me that we have a pretty good working relationship with them based on our conversations, Jason, and based on the presentation today.
Mr. Chairman, I feel like we have an excellent relationship with the reclamation team that we're working with. They're very helpful. They're very thoughtful and considerate of our wishes and our asks. So I value that partnership.
Good, I do too. And I don't know how much you heard about the Forest Service, but we gave them lots of accolades too, because they've been working quite well with our state forestry. And I'm glad that the Bureau of Rec's doing this. We got to figure out how to get our Bureau of Land Management to work a little bit better, I think, with some of our state agencies. So, but I appreciate how much, because I know that comes down to building relationships, and that's fostering those and keeping those relationships alive. And so I do appreciate you guys taking the time to come visit. I know this is probably not a normal committee for you guys to come to, but I blame it on you. It's your fault, Chairman there, Engineer Gephardt. But I do appreciate you coming up. Any other questions? I guess we should open it up for public comment. Oh, Dan, you got something to say?
Kind of a question, or just a lead in to maybe they can answer. Could you give us a brief description of how long it takes to get federal permits? Because I know that's a very difficult procedure. And when you have those and you have a dam that has permits, we should fight pretty hard to keep our eyes on that dam.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that, again, it depends, but with the information we typically have going into a NEPA process where we've got all the alternatives looked at, when we permitted like Levitt Reservoir and Alkali Creek up in the Bighorn Basin, that was during the first Trump administration. And I would say it probably took 2 to 3 years, probably closer to 2 years. We've been working on West Fork Reservoir NEPA for a while now. I would say 3, maybe 4. Can't remember when we started, to be honest. But it's complex and it involves a land exchange, so it's a little different too. So I would say 2 to 3 years, and it's been fairly consistent if you were to compare reservoirs apples to apples, independent of the administrations, I would say.
Go afoul.
One more. I just wanted to remind everyone, we had a previous governor that wanted 10 dams in 10 years. And when was that? Like maybe 2019, 18? I'm not sure, but.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Larson, I think that was probably in 2016 timeframe. We might have got there. It comes down to money, I guess, is what I would say. Dams and reservoirs are not cheap to build, and kind of just have to have the foresight that they're a good thing. And if they pencil out benefit cost ratio, that we should move forward with them when we can. So.
Thank you. If nothing else, do we have any public comments? Don't see a lot of public here. No, nobody online. Is there anything that the committee would like to do besides go home? Yeah, it was. And I guess one thing I would like to say is, Representative Conley, can you let your constituents know how much we appreciated them? The facility was great. I appreciated their accommodations, and I enjoyed my visit. I'm assuming everybody else did. It's always fun to come to Buffalo. So you're blessed to live here. It's a beautiful part of the state, but let your constituents know we appreciate it coming here. With that, is there a motion to adjourn, anyone? Oh, okay. Thank you, Dan.
Is
There's Senator Dockstader.
Is there any more specific direction on Fontenelle, or do you want to handle that through another committee, or what do you want done here, sir?
I don't know. I would assume that the large water project's working on that, but would it help? I guess I'll ask, would it help if our committee was to do something to support your efforts? How could we help you with that?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the sentiment. I don't know that I have an ask right now. I don't know if we mentioned, I think Jason mentioned the funding that was already provided for us to pursue that. I think once we get to the quantity that we're looking at and the value of that, depending on what we have appropriated or not, that may be a time. But I feel like our negotiation, not negotiation, but our conversations with Reclamation are very good right now. I don't know that there's any changes there. I appreciate the offer. I feel comfortable with where we're headed with it. That would be my take on it, Jason.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the only other comment I would make, like Senator, I won't just call him Senator, I don't know why. Brandon is the easiest. The funding's in place. Once the negotiated agreement is ready, then we would take that back to the Water Development Commission and eventually the governor for approval. So I think that's all in place statutorily. And then any funding that would be necessary for riprap placement, I believe we've kind of had a plan. We've got some reservoir O&M accounts and that where we can move some money around. And we've got a pretty healthy balance in Buffalo Bill Reservoir that we've been looking at as potential money that we could then use for that riprap project. And then also just keep an eye on federal programs that might pop up that could help us with that too, instead of using our money.
Okay. Well, thank you. And definitely, if there is a need, let us know and I'm sure you can count on our committee to support you.
Mr. Chairman, it just seems like a long time. I can remember standing out on that dam and hearing the discussion and saying, where are we gonna go with this? So
Yeah.
just checking before these gentlemen left the room.
Well, it was a wise catch because I was ready to move on. But thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I may add, as you're aware, we are right now working with the basin and advisory committee for the pilot conservation program. So if we get support for that pilot conservation program for the Colorado River, that may be something that this committee can consider supporting if you so choose to do that. But
Okay.
there's still some work to do, and we're working with the Select Water Committee through that process as well.
Well, and our last meeting is going to be on October 10th in Laramie, so it's not too far for you to drive, but maybe that might be something that we can look at as a letter of support or something. Because I'm familiar with it. Dan's got to be somewhat familiar with it too. He's been there a little longer than me. But that's something that the committee may need, we can bring them up to speed with that. But you bet. Thank you. Go ahead, Bob.
Just a real quick question while I got you guys back up here. Just, I always like the history, like LaPrelle is a good example. It was a private dam. And now it's going to be funded by the state, essentially by the taxpayers. How typically in the past were, dams put up? I mean, I know like the Kendrick, back in the Kendrick days, when he was senator back there, he was a big water guy trying to, I think that's when a lot of them were built, like Pathfinder and Alcova, Seminole, I don't know, during the Depression or early 1900s. And then you mentioned, 10 dams per year. Are those all, do users pay for those, or is it all just state funds? Just so I kind of have a little grasp on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I can speak to the history of, when all the Bureau dams were built. But essentially now, the reason that Count 3, the dam and reservoir account, was set up was because for the longest time, we had 67% grants, up to 33% loans if a district needed a loan. And when we're talking tens of millions of dollars, 33% loan, it's hard to afford when you're growing, grass hay sometimes. So the way it's got a little bit different criteria, we can fund up to 100% grant for these dams, but it's really based on the ability to pay of the members in that district. So it comes back to crop type, what benefit they're going to see from additional ton of hay. Like I said, put surveys out and talk to those landowners and understand, okay, what do you think you're willing to pay? So it's ability and willingness to pay. And then we kind of land on a grant loan breakdown that we take back to the commission and the Select Water Committee for their thought and approval. And if they like that moving forward, then that gets put into the construction bill eventually for those terms. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mr.
Chairman, they're not all 100% grant. You take into account what you're working with and the users, and they may fund part of it, and then the state picks up the rest of it, essentially, depending on I'm sure they all have their own personality on how you structure the construction bills on those. Yeah. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I would say that's correct. Big Sandy was 100% because we used funds that through the Western Area Power Authority, WAPA, that came back for reservoirs within the Colorado River Basin. And I won't get into that too much, but we use federal money, so it was 100% on that. But the majority of the other ones that we worked on are really that grant loan breakdown. Yeah.
Did you have something to add?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just some statistics.
Yep. She died.
Yeah.
Yep. It's not.
So within our dam safety program, which is about 1,470 some dams, just some quick numbers. I think about 150 of those are under the ownership of federal ownership. 25-ish are state-owned, and then the remainder are privately owned. I don't know how they were funded, but that's who we would consider as the owners of those facilities in our state.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you run over one more time how you guys are funded with what drives the agency? It's not taxpayer dollars, but
Correct. So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, it's mineral severance taxes. So the revenues from coal, oil, natural gas, et cetera, that come back to the state. I'll just use an example. If it's $500 million in a given year, 155 of those 500 million are set off to the side, and certain agencies and counties and a lot of different groups get a percentage of that funding. So our account one, new development, gets 12.45% of 155 million in this example, equates to about 19.3 million per year. Account two, rehab, gets, I think it's like 2.1% of that 155. That equates to about 3.3 million. And then, like I mentioned, the dam and reservoir account gets 0.5%, 775,000. And then the other revenue that we get is the funding. So the active balance in each one of those accounts is invested by the treasurer. So the interest on that account also grows a little bit. And then I guess there's also diversions out of our accounts. For instance, we call them non-project diversions. Our budget for our office in the amount of about $5 million a year. The Board of Control budget from the state engineer's office for all the folks that regulate water throughout the state and the vehicles they drive and the offices they work out of are funded through account one. And that always hasn't been that way. It's been more of a budget balancer. So there's been times where it's been taken out of the general fund for the Board of Control. And then for the past 8 years or so, I want to say, it's been out of account one again. So that's something you guys might hear because our demands on our program are much more than the funding we have available. And that's really been stagnant since the 80s on that severance taxes. And then there's some other ones like we fund 10% of the capitalization grant for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund through EPA, and then some little ones through the Department of Ag for water quality and different things. So.
Follow.
thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. So basically, we're using the severance money to reinvest in the infrastructure of Wyoming and develop our water.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, that's exactly right. I often say we're taking the revenue from a non-renewable resource and we're investing in it in the renewable resource of water.
Were you trying to get my attention, Senator Larson? Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So the last item is to adjourn. We're 15 minutes early. Should we take a 15-minute recess and then come back and adjourn? I hate to not use our time.
15 minutes of Western drive time.
That's all right. That's a valid point. Motion to adjourn, anybody, or? I don't want to act without my support from my team. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you. And thank you. Appreciate you guys, how much you helped us.